My friends, good day. We have more information about Jeju Airlines 2216. A quick recap. It's a plane that crashed on December 29th, 2024. A Boeing 737-800 that was flying from Bangkok to Muan, South Korea, with 181 people on board. Well, just as the flight seemed about to end, the plane was on final approach at about 500 feet. At that moment, it flew through a flock of birds. You should know that very often these birds are attracted to the areas around airports, sometimes by landfills or other industries that tend to attract birds. And this later becomes a real danger, which we call bird strike hazard for aviation. Well, the plane goes through and then from there it will throttle up again. Trying to turn back means going against the reciprocal runway heading. That means he won't come back to land on the same runway that was originally planned, but will go around the other way, come back to land, and then he lands at a very high speed. Pause. He's going to slide on the runway. He didn't have the landing gear down, so he's going to slide literally on metal against asphalt. He's going to slide at high speed. He goes off the runway and he's going to hit a mound of dirt. It's a mound that was built to support an instrument landing system antenna. You should know that sometimes some runways aren't completely flat. They can have dips toward the middle. And if the antenna is placed too low, planes might not receive it at certain times during landing or takeoff. So what do? We raise the instrument landing system, the antennas, a little bit. And in this case, instead of choosing fragile or frangible mounts and all that, what did we do? We brought in a bulldozer, created a mound of earth, placed a concrete platform on top, and used that as a support for the instrument landing system. And that, of course, was just waiting for the day when a plane would run off the runway at high speed and cause the attached disaster. So as I was saying, at the moment of impact, there were 179 deaths out of 181. 2 survivors. Where were the survivors? Well, for once, it seems that the theory saying the safest seats are all at the back is justified. Well, it was 2 flight attendants who were sitting, not just in the seats at the very back, but even further back. That means they were literally sitting at the tail section. You know, when you walk through a 737, when you go to the end, you reach the end of the last row of passenger seats. After that, you have the restrooms, and then you have another area where usually during the flight, the cabin crew goes to get food, or the carts with duty-free items or drinks and other things. Well, that's where they were sitting and they survived, but unfortunately everyone else died. So at the time on this channel, the theory that was put forward was that one of the engines had failed. Engine number 2, so the right engine, had failed. I use failed as a general term. Let's say it was damaged. It was damaged precisely by the flock of birds. And then the pilots shut down the engine by mistake. They shut down the wrong engine. We'll talk about it in a minute. It seems that what the South Korean authorities are saying confirms this theory. All right. So just to tell you once again, as a side note, the theories you see on this channel are truly exclusive to this channel. It comes from analyses and sometimes also from informants on the ground who don't want to be named. Sometimes I say it's an analysis or based on a photo, but other times it's not about the photo. I'm just protecting an informant. Just so you know, I'm not saying that's what happened here, but sometimes it is. So that's why often this channel goes against what you hear in the French-speaking or English-speaking media or others. So there you go, it's totally separate. So at the time, that was the theory that was put forward. Not the engine of engine number 2, the right one. The pilots accidentally shut down engine number 1 and end up with nothing at all. That's the theory accepted by the investigators at this stage. So now there's a problem. It's that when the investigators try to release their report. So generally, how does it work? There's a kind of conference with the press, with the interested parties, and then with the investigators. These are joint investigations. For example, the engines are French FM engines. So, of course, we'll have the Bureau of Inquiry and Analysis, the Accident Investigation Bureau, which will go to the site with one or two specialists. We'll have the TSB because it's a Boeing, so they know Boeing very well, and we'll ask them for help. This occurs under Annex 13, where a panel of experts oversees, but locals do the speaking. It's not the foreigners. They're there to help, but they're not the ones who actually write the report. It's written by the local experts, so here's what happened. It's that when the investigators started talking about the content of their factual report and wanted to make it public, once again, the factual report is not a final report. The difference is that the factual report is much shorter and doesn't have any area or doesn't have an analysis section. It's a report that only contains the facts as established up to now. We have state reports. Sometimes we have one, sometimes we have several as the investigation progresses. So there's absolutely no attempt to provide probable causes, just the facts. But while they were listing the facts, well, the story turned into a brawl. It means that the victims' families started shouting scandal, interrupting the investigators' presentation, and then finally they all stood up, and then they literally opposed the continuation, the pursuit of this conference, and then to making the report public. So the investigators ended up canceling the conference, and they canceled the release of the state report or the factual report. So the problem is, we know they said at this conference the pilots shut down the wrong engine, but we don't have many details at this stage because they're left with the report. That's it. So why did the victims' families oppose it? Well, let me tell you something. The thing is, you have to understand something. When there's a plane crash, sometimes, even before all the bodies have been removed from the site of the tragedy, you already have lawyers who specialize in litigation with airlines, manufacturers, and all that. So they come with their briefcases, their contracts, and they're scanning with, they always have fixers with them, and they're looking for, this person is crying, "Hi, do you have a family member on the plane? Was it your dad?" All that. "Come, do you want a tissue and all that? Do you want to sign here?" And actually what these people do is they want to get contracts to go after the airlines and the manufacturers. For the families, on their behalf, I've often spoken to these lawyers, and when you meet them, you have a drink with them, they tell you, yes, or yes, Bouygues, we've already worked with them, all that. Oh yes, we know Airbus and have many contacts there. We've already worked together. And when they say they've worked together, it means they've managed to get a certain number of millions out of the company. And in reality, they have a whole press book on every company, every engine, every manufacturer, every aircraft maker, every company. They have huge binders and sometimes no more than airline pilots. These guys are really good. You can't underestimate them. They're people who are very, very good. What they do is they have the COM, they have the ADs, and it goes even further. They often access documentation unavailable to pilots, including confidential manufacturer and engineering documents. They paid, they managed, they use the legal system, all that, to get them. So these are people, even if their profession is often seen as somewhat vulgar, right? They're still technically very good. And if you will, what they don't want, and that's why they brief precisely the families, they brief their clients. They don't want it to be the pilot's fault. Yes, because if it's the pilot's fault, just imagine the pilots are dead. What are you going to do? Are you going to go after the pilot's widow? I mean, look, he has a car paid in installments, a television bought with a credit card. It's not his grieving widow and children who are going to give money. Ideally for these lawyers, it's that the blame falls on the party with the most money. That means the fault of the manufacturer, so the fault of Boeing or the fault of the airline. Ideally Boeing, since airlines aren't always financially strong. A lot of airlines are barely scraping by, financially speaking, you know. And so, well, when they have a plane crash, you'll notice that a lot of small airlines, when they have a major accident, they don't last long. A little while later, they shut down, their accounts are empty. So there you go. So ideally it's Boeing. So that's why there was this blockage. But unfortunately, the investigators can't adapt the report to the economic interests or legal procedures of one party or another. The families admitted they weren't informed, but the issue is there wasn't going to be a referendum. I mean, it's a report. There are only facts in it. There aren't any analyses. So that's it. I just wanted to mention this as an aside. So the problem we have today in aviation is that if an engine fails, let's say I'm a passenger on a plane and an engine fails. You know what? What's my first fear? My first fear isn't even the engine that failed, because the plane can fly for hours with the other engine. Look at extended range twin engine operational performance standards, certified planes. They can easily fly. Many can fly 3 hours on a single engine, no problem. They can even fly longer. Actually, it's the certification that requires 3 hours if we're talking about extended range twin engine operational performance standards 180, for example, but there are longer ones than that. So I was saying that flying on a single engine in itself is not the end of the world. But the first fear I would have is that the pilots might shut down the wrong engine, because when an engine fails, what happens? Well, it can vibrate, it can spit flames, sometimes it can send smoke into the cabin, all that. So what are we going to do? Ideally, we want to cut off its fuel. So cutting off the fuel means shutting it down. On a commercial plane, it's one move. Click. Remember Air India 161, one click and it's done. So the fear or the risk of error here, because normally if you want, it works like this. The vision I want to share with you is what is the risk at each moment of an aircraft's evolution. If a plane is flying normally with both engines running, the chances that a pilot will accidentally shut down one or both engines are extremely low. Since the Air India incident, we may need to reconsider that view. But when there's an engine failure, what is the pilot going to do? So the pilot is required or is called to shut down the engine that has failed, that's acting up. What's the risk? Well, the risk is that the action he's going to take is extremely crucial. If he shuts down the wrong engine by mistake, he's dead. However, it seems that many pilots haven't fully understood this during their training. It's extremely critical now. You have two buttons. Stop the wrong one and you're dead. That's it. That's what happened on that plane. Let me tell you a story. I did an Airbus simulator with a pilot friend, and I can tell you one thing. When you simulate failures, engine, just on a simulator, I'm not even talking about real life, I'm talking about on a simulator. That means you have less psychological pressure, even though sometimes you forget. It truly feels like being in a real plane. The movement, vibrations, and noise make it immersive. The plane is taking off on the runway. I hear a big boom. It goes one way, I correct it. There are alarms, there are noises. You gently pull it off the ground and all that. I can tell you that in that moment, you know an engine has failed, but in the heat of the moment, under stress, I can't immediately say if it's the right or left one. It's not something that's intuitively obvious in the moment. You need to slow down in your head and think. However, very often in some companies, especially Asian ones, in certain schools, the emphasis in these situations is on speed of execution. That means there are people who seem like they want to become the Bruce Lee of cockpits. It has to be done like in a simulator. I'm speeding up. Boom, engine failure, click, click, done. Look, I did it. Checklist finished. Unfortunately, in reality, with stress, with fear and nerves, you can definitely do things quickly, but do them wrong. We stop the wrong engine. What happens next? We're in a very delicate situation now. Why? Because you can't just restart it like that afterwards. Because once the engines stop, there's still the batteries. The batteries themselves can't start an engine. The batteries don't have enough. The battery in a car or in a truck, it can start an engine, but airplanes don't start on a battery. Jet airplanes don't start. So what jet airplanes have to do is when they start the engines, it's either with a ground power unit that's possible or with the auxiliary power unit. except that the auxiliary power unit is shut down during landing. It started afterward, but it's shut down during landing. That means here, he shuts off both engines. This time they can't start them that way. They need to turn on the auxiliary power unit and wait for it to start. That can easily take a minute and a half. Once it's on, only then do we start the engines. So when we stop them, it's very hard to get them going again. You see what I mean? So if it's stopped, it's stopped. The pilots could have, and I almost want to say should have, ditched, because all around the airport there's the sea, and sometimes a water landing, if it's done well, can even mean 0 casualties. Remember the case of Lutsen. It can be something that's done very gracefully. The plane lands, people are evacuated. Maybe there's one injured person and someone shaken up, but nothing else. Whereas landing them at high speed on a hard runway meant guaranteeing everyone's death. So we're, I want to say, once again, dealing with a rather suboptimal performance from the pilots of this plane. We'll see when the final report comes out, if people let it be released. Because the way things are going, I think it's going to be very, very difficult to have an investigation carried out calmly. So right now it seems to be compromised. So we'll see when the final report comes out what the analyses will say. But clearly we're heading towards engine failure, followed by shutting down the wrong engine. Thank you, my friends, for watching this video until now. And also, just to let you know, I won't finish without telling you that there's another video on this channel where you see this story. I'll put it as an overlay for you. Go check it out, because this story tells you exactly, it gives you the dynamic sometimes that happens in cockpits when an engine fails and the wrong one is shut down. Thanks, friends. See you soon.